That should be right. Mrs. Gans was a massive woman. She had thick legs, no ankles, and grayish-brown hair atop an enormous head. I was 13, and she was my 9th grade teacher at a progressive school in New York City. Unless she was in the classroom, a cigarette was always in her mouth. She taught a combination of English and social studies. It was a painfully long class, and I was always bored. I don't remember learning one thing that entire year, but I do remember Ellen Leaf. I had a crush on Ellen Leaf. She had skinny arms and was a year older than me. On this particular day, I was especially bored. Mrs. Gans was writing on the chalkboard. Her back was to the class. I decided it was the perfect time to send a note to Ellen. Just as I was leaning across the table to get Ellen's attention, Mrs. Gans turned around and saw me. She glared at me. Then she marched up to my desk. She had said many times, "No note writing in my class." I had been caught red-handed, in flagrante. She pushed her fists into her thick waist. Her hips grew bigger. Her chest swelled. Her face turned red with rage. She was an intractable mass. Everything about her said, "Don't mess with me." I had messed with her. She grabbed the note from my hand. 25 ninth graders waited for the explosion they all knew would come. Mrs. Gans never disappointed. She stared at me with utter contempt. Her voice boomed across the room. I still remember her exact words. "Where were you born? In a barn? You make me sick. You make me vomit." I remember my humiliation as if it were yesterday. Most people, when they were embarrassed, turn red. I was the opposite. I could feel the color leave my face. I turned white as a ghost. I was lightheaded. Mrs. Gans bore down on me. "You are repulsive." I was even more humiliated because I didn't know what repulsive meant. She tore my note in half, then in half again, and again, and again, and again, until there must have been 100 tiny pieces. Then she tossed the pieces like confetti into the air. As they floated to the floor, she shoved her hands even deeper into her waist. Her bosoms protruded like watermelons. "Pick it up," she bellowed. "Every last piece." I looked around the room. Everyone was watching, including Emily Gans, Mrs. Gans's daughter, who was almost as large as her mother. I thought I saw a smirk on Emily's face. At that moment, I hated her. I hated Mrs. Gans. "No," I said. There was a collective gasp. "Get out," Mrs. Gans shouted. "Get out of my classroom." I was relieved and happy to leave the room. But then I found out that Mrs. Gans made Ellen Leaf pick up all those tiny pieces of paper. A few days later, I was going down the stairs from the lunchroom when I saw Emily Gans leaning over the railing trying to get someone's attention. Her butt was in the perfect position. I couldn't resist. I smacked that butt hard. Slap! Right on target. Boy, did she yelp. I had gotten even for that smirk. Then she turned around. Oh my God. It wasn't Emily Gans. It was Mrs. Gans, her mother. The look of disgust she gave me was unbelievable. I apologized over and over. She didn't care. She said I must be crazy to do something like this, and she was going to send me to the school psychologist. I think I was assigned to pick up trash for a month. It was no big deal. But her words, "You make me sick, you make me vomit, you are repulsive," stayed with me for decades. At times, I couldn't help but wonder if she was right. Maybe I was repulsive. And yet Mrs. Gans taught me the power of teachers' words. It was a power I promised myself never to abuse. 45 years later, my class had its only official reunion. Ironically, we had it at Ellen Leaf's home in New York City. Almost everyone showed up, including Emily Gans. She didn't look well. Both legs were in braces. She told us her mother had died from lung cancer many years ago. I found myself alone with her talking about the old days. For some reason, I decided to tell her about the pain her mother caused me. She listened quietly and then said, "You got off easy." She asked me if I could imagine what it would be like having a Mrs. Gans for a mother. She told me her horror stories. They lived across the river in New Jersey. Emily had to take the long ride to and from school, 5 days a week in a car filled with cigarette smoke, while her mother spewed venom about every student she ever had. Emily had to listen to constant, never-ending tirades about her own behavior. She was right. I got off easy. I took her hand, and then we shared a long hug and some tears. Emily and her mother had lived very painful lives. I felt compassion for both of them. At that moment, 45 years of anger melted away. Thank you.